There was no longevity medicine. There was no true anti-aging. It was just kind of like a wishful thought. So, I was an anesthesiologist and I spent a lot of time on call in the hospital doing nothing with a lot of access to scientific research. So I just started going down these silly rabbit holes of, I wonder what happens to the mitochondria. Wonder what happens to your DNA. Wonder this, wonder that. And it just ended up with this monster project. And that, in my world, became the Seven Tenets of Aging.
What if aging wasn't something you had to accept, but something you could measure, manage, and even slow down? Dr. Sandra Kaufmann thinks exactly that. As the creator of the Kaufmann Protocol, a science-based system targeting the actual mechanisms of aging, she's helping thousands rethink what's possible for their bodies and their health span. Today, we'll unpack how the protocol works, what longevity medicine is, and what the future holds for a world where aging could one day be optional. Let's dive in. Good afternoon, Dr. Kaufmann. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Happy to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you. I've heard you on multiple podcasts, so I'm very, very honored you're here with me today. I wanted to start with how you first got fascinated with the science of aging for people listening. Was there maybe an aha moment in your life that made you choose a career in this area?
Sort of. And I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but so I started life as a cell biologist because I think cells are pretty damn cool. But ultimately, I went to med school and became an anesthesiologist. I did a little bit of surgery, a little bit of general surgery, ended up being an anesthesiologist, which is really fun because it's about mucking around with the human body and how drugs can affect you very quickly, right? So that's kind of fun. On top of that, I'm a bit of a hack athlete. I'm certainly not professional in any way, shape, or form, as pointed out by one of my partners who's actually an Olympian. But I was a big rock climber. And at some point in my mid-50s, I was sort of just hanging out on a cliff. We trad climbed, right? So your partner goes up, sets it. I don't lead. He set the route, and I'm sitting there sort of like belaying as he went up, sitting on the side of a cliff, and then it's my turn to sort of go up. And it dawned on me probably 400 feet in the air that at some point in time, you can't really do this, right? Like a life limit. It's like, how you can play golf probably forever. Maybe you can play, I don't know, you can bowl forever, but rock climbing's pretty damn active, right? And you start making mistakes as you get older. You're not as strong, you're not as this, you're not as that. It's kind of, it's not a good thing. So as I was hanging there, I'm like, damn it, I wish you could stop aging. And I started at that point to try to figure out, like, was it possible to unravel aging? And honestly, it's a simple deceleration process. At some point, we may be able to reverse it, but my goal at the time and still is to just slow it down significantly.
Well, I feel like it's always been maybe historically treated as it's inevitable. It's going to happen to all of us. Was there something maybe you saw in research that suggested otherwise, or the potential to slow things down?
Well, if you're sort of familiar with cells, of which I was, and familiar with drugs, the idea that things are cellular processes that change over time, maybe they don't need to change over time, right? There are a million theories out there now. And, it's now 10 years past that sort of, oh shit, I want to do something about this moment. So a lot of ideas have changed. When I was looking into this, there was no longevity medicine. There was no true anti-aging. It was just kind of like a wishful thought, right? And so, I was an anesthesiologist, as I said, and I spent a lot of time on call in the hospital doing nothing with a lot of access to scientific research, right? Because in a hospital, you can Google anything and you get papers from everywhere in the world and it's free. So you're like, oh, this is amazing. So I just started going down these silly rabbit holes of, I wonder what happens to the mitochondria. Wonder what happens to your DNA. Wonder this, wonder that. And it just ended up with this monster project. And people would walk into my office and they're like, what the hell are you doing? Because I tell people this, and unless you actually saw it, it seems like kind of silly. But I had Post-it notes everywhere. Like, oh my God, like this is a brilliant idea. Put it on a Post-it note. And like I had one of those multicolored stacks. So it really looked like an ad for like 3M, right? 1,000 Post-its everywhere. And the more I got to sort of understand you sort of understand that like some of the ideas overlapped, some of them were just blooming stupid, but as they coalesced, they sort of accumulated into seven piles. And that, in my world, became the seven tenets of aging. I could have made it slightly smaller, slightly bigger. The other thought was that people can remember seven things, right? That's why telephone numbers once upon a time had seven digits. Anything beyond that, you go, oh, you sort of, I'm trying not to curse, whatever, like you can remember seven. So I'm like, okay. So it coalesced into seven piles. And then the question is can you actually do anything to fix those things? And it turned out that you could. And this was just like eureka moments. I mean, just truly amazing. It was like, say, Agent X, for example, a sirtuin 1 activator, and you like go, holy shit, you can activate sirtuin 1? That's cool. That one on my list. Wonder how powerful it is. Wonder how it compares to this thing over here. And so I created a rating system so that I could organize it in my brain. But slowly, 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 you sort of chip away at all of these ideas. And then the more people talk about them, the more streamlined they become. Like within me starting to do this, within a couple of years, everyone's drinking antioxidant juices. Now, granted, the amount in those juices are garbage. Like they're not really going to help you. However, like the vocabulary of longevity started entering the commercial world, and all of a sudden it wasn't like this ridiculous sort of chasing windmill kind of approach. It was like, this is kind of legitimate. And now, 10 years later, they're like, oh my God, you're an expert. And it's only because I started dicking around with it like before anybody else.
Were there people at the time pushing back on your theories and I guess the work you were putting into it, or was it so sort of Wild West that no one really was ahead of it like you were?
So what was really funny is there were very few longevity conferences, right? Now they've popped up everywhere. So, but I sat in a hospital, right? I was the chief of anesthesia. And people would come in, surgeons, all sorts of different types of physicians, be like, what are you doing? And I would explain it to them. And I got like coughed at, like made fun of over and over and over again. But over time, I mean, it was like a 10-year process. They all got fat, their hair's falling out, their skin is wrinkling. And then at some point, they all secretly snuck back to me and they're like, all right, what do we do? Right? So in public, it was embarrassing to be associated with someone that was into longevity. In secret, oh, they all wanted the answer. So it was really sort of this bimodal experience.
So the people you're with are coming at you saying, okay, help me out. Was there a time when you started to realize, okay, what I'm doing is actually showing the results? Because I think a lot of people might say, all right, I have these theories, but now I'm starting to see that the theories are coming to life and they're actually working and making a difference. When did you start to notice that?
Well, I started noticing it in myself almost immediately. Your skin feels better, your energy is better. Now, keep in mind, you start aging at like 35 to 36, depending on like who you are, right? Some people a little earlier, some people a little later, depending on sort of concomitant medical problems. I was already 45 when I started this, right? So God knows, I must have been in terrible, I mean, I was in pretty good shape for my age at that time with no additives, right? But as soon as I started activating pathways and just doing all of these amazing things, I felt myself improve dramatically. Right? And then when people around me be like, I want what you have. So I started the Panacea simply because people are like, okay, I can swallow 5 things and that's all I can do. Okay. So I created just something that like was easy to get, easy to take. And then people were like coming up to me within like a month or two. Oh my God, I feel so much better. And then I put book 1 out and I didn't have a publisher. Because what's longevity medicine? What's anti-aging? You're an anesthesiologist. Do you have a degree in this? Well, there was, anyway, whatever. There's a lot of pushback. So I self-published on Amazon. And amazingly enough, it became this cult classic. And people started emailing me from around the globe. And this was just astounding to me. I don't know who the hell these people are. But they wanted more information. So, okay, you build a website. I had no intention of building a website, built a website. And then all of a sudden I got flooded with emails. People like, oh, I've tried your Panacea. I feel amazing. Now what do I do? And it just grew and grew and grew. So there is no doubt in my mind that this stuff works.
So for people who maybe are not familiar, could you break that down?
So what, the Panacea? Yeah. So what I did is if you look at the 7 tenets of aging, and very, very quickly, category 1 is DNA alterations. 2 is mitochondrial failure. 3 is pathways. So it's sirtuins, it's AMP kinase, it's mTOR, it's circadian rhythms. 4 is repair mechanisms. So DNA repair, proteostasis, and then autophagy. 5 is your immune system that turns into your inflammatory system. 6 is what I call individual cell requirements. So it's the idea that senescent cells are bad, stem cells are good, a brain cell is different than a liver cell, different than a bone cell. And then the last category was waste management. So it's glucose that sort of turns into AGEs that sort of trashes your body, lipofuscin accumulation, and then like toxicities. So like iron overload, that sort of thing. Anyway, so if you accept that those are the 7 reasons, the big categories that your cells age, I tried to come up with things that would like hit as many of those categories as possible. So it turned into what I called the Panacea, only because the letters worked out that way. So the P stands for pterostilbene, and the choices in this category are pterostilbene or resveratrol, and it's a really potent polyphenol that activates sirtuin 1. So that was sort of crucial. PA is astaxanthin. So astaxanthin is a really incredible free radical scavenger. It's lipid soluble, so it travels around in your HDLs, LDLs, so it blocks oxidation of your cholesterol panel, which decreases risk of atherosclerosis, decreases sunburn, decreases DNA damage. Great. N is an NAD precursor. So anyone over the age of 40 statistically is likely to be NAD deficient. You need more as you get older, you create less. Therefore, not only do you not make a whole lot of energy in your mitochondria, 500 different enzymes in your body don't function very well. So that's crucial. So Panacea, PAN, and then there are 2 Cs. Curcumin is an amazing anti-inflammatory. You have to get a good bioavailable one, but it's amazing. And then the second C is for carnosine because it was a very cheap, easy transglycosylating agent, meaning glucose wreaks havoc upon our system. If you get to it early before it transitions into becoming an AGE, you can actually get rid of the glucose. So that turned out to be the easiest, cheapest, bang for your buck way of approaching aging. Now, since then, there's 60 some agents that I have rated that I can recommend to people, as well as 12 pharmaceuticals. But anyone over 40, I generally start with the Panacea, unless there's extenuating circumstances.
And then how are they administering this? Is it they're taking these supplements once a day?
Supplements once a day, orally.
Okay. Oh, so oral supplements once a day. And now obviously it's not like a one size fits all, right?
Correct.
Because the protocol you have, I believe it breaks aging down into different biological pathways. So can you explain like the why it's such an important shift from everyone thinks, oh, I need a vitamin D. Okay, great. But
Right.
when it comes to anti-aging, like how important is that shift away from the one size fits all mentality?
Sure. So there's 2 ways to think about sort of what supplements you're going to take. And people go, they think that supplements is all one bucket, and it's not. And vitamin D is the perfect example. For example, if you are deficient in vitamin D, you will have health problems, right? So you want to supplement that to have normal levels. That being said, having high levels is not necessarily good for you. So all you're doing in that category is making up a deficit, right? So in fact, you are supplementing what you need. But vitamin D is not a longevity supplement. It's a normal health supplement, right? Compare and contrast that with a sirtuin activator. So sirtuins, of which there are 7 mammalian sirtuins, there is a gene that makes the enzyme, and the sirtuin, it's the activity, it's called a histone deacetylase. And that means it's an on-off switch for things in your cells. 1, 6, and 7 live in your nucleus, 3, 4, 5 live in your mitochondria, 2 sort of flits around your cell. But they turn things on and off sort of in an epigenetic fashion. And as you age, the sirtuin levels decline, as does the cofactor NAD. And so you're unable to turn things on and off, right? This is aging. And as a consequence of that, things that normally would happen don't happen. So for example, that 1 and 6 control your circadian rhythms. So when you are sirtuin 1 and 6 deficient, your sleep is off. Everyone over the age of 40, 50, 60, they're like, oh, I can't get to sleep anymore. Why? Because all the patterns are down and over. That's just what happens when you're deficient. You store fat differently. I get a million clients that say, I eat the same thing, I exercise the same way, I have the same amount of muscle, but I've got this, glob of fat in my middle. I call it the abdominal tire syndrome. Why? Because sirtuins tell your body how and where to store fat. right? It also tells you what source of fuel to use. Am I using glucose? Am I using triglycerides? Am I using cholesterol? That's all determined by your sirtuins. So sirtuin failure is a big aspect of aging. But we don't eat sirtuins. We take things that trigger sirtuin activity. And that's longevity medicine. Okay, so that answers that. In terms of individuals, people that are healthy, reasonably healthy, it's standard aging protocols and one size fits all in terms of what you should be taking, but not necessarily how much you should be taking. So a 50-kilogram person is going to be way different than, 150-kilogram person, right? Volume of distribution, fat, muscle ratios, all that kind of stuff, right? But if you add on medical problems, then the whole game changes. So when I do consults, the question is what stuff runs in your family? So biggest one, right? If you have some sort of inflammatory disease, we need to put more emphasis on things that get rid of inflammation. Or if you have a family history of a multitude of cancers, there's probably something wrong with your DNA repair mechanisms, and we aim towards that, right? Or if everyone's diabetic, well, you probably will be too, so let's aim toward higher glucose control. So I guess in summation, there's a generic way of approaching aging, and then we can personalize it based on the individual's medical issues.
And how much are you a believer in genetics? Because some people I speak with say, well, maybe it's 10 to 20% of what is going on in the person. And then there's people that believe it's, a much larger number. Where do you fall in that sort of belief system?
That's a very good question. I've seen some studies that say genetics are 10%. I've seen some studies that genetics say it's 70%, right? It is hard to say. There's definitively a genetic component. Can you overfix it or can you override it? I think you probably can to a certain degree. And the best way of looking at that is if you look at identical twins, right? When they are born, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they look identical. And then moms always put them in the same clothes. So, right, they really do look identical. Fast forward and they're 50, all of a sudden they are not so identical, right? So that they've overridden their genetics. Some dude, one of them exercises, doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, etc. They're going to be thin, active, fine. The other guy sat around and drank beer and ate potato chips all day. He's going to be completely different, right? So there is a genetic component, and then there's your lifestyle that sort of is overlaid upon that, and it affects it in an epigenetic fashion as well as just a nutritional activity level sort of deal. So it's both. Levels, I don't know.
No, I get that. So when someone comes to you, what sort of is there a set of labs you're running or whatever test they might be, just a baseline for everyone?
So I usually start with standard labs just to rule out standard medical problems, right? So we're going to look at a CBC, which is what is your hemoglobin? Let's just make sure you're not dying of anemia or infection. That's a CBC. Chem 20 looks at kidney function, liver function, all of that sort of thing. I don't want to load someone up if they already have significant kidney, liver problems processing stuff. We look at coagulation panel, right? Do you bleed or do you not? If you're a clotter, that's a big deal. Or if you can't clot anything and you're gonna, bleed out if someone touches you, that's a whole other big deal. What are your iron loads? So for example, iron is fantastic. And I just got on this big iron kick and I just gave a big lecture. So I'm sort of obsessed with it at the moment. But as we get older, I'm convinced we are all iron overloaded. Okay. But if you look at blood levels, it'll tell you that you are iron deficient for the most part. Why? Because as you get older and you are inflamed, IL-6, one of the inflammatory markers, activates a cascade of things which forces iron into your cells and locks it in there. Right? So it's called anemia of inflammation. And as we are inflammaging, we become anemic. However, iron gets stored in our brain and our liver and our muscle tissues and causes significant malfunction, right? Now, what do most doctors do? They give you iron. And you're oh, that's kind of dumb. And they stick you in a hyperbaric chamber, which is even worse, right? Terrible for you. On the other hand, if you can chelate the iron out of your cells, then you can either excrete it or it becomes more physiologically available. So lots of things, but I'm totally off topic. Point being is that you can check sort of your iron levels through your blood, not really, but CAT scans and MRIs are actually useful. MRI of the liver and the heart will tell you what your iron levels are. Anyway, basic labs are fine. We go with family history. That tells you pretty much everything you want to know. Now, for people that are very serious about their aging, we can do epigenetic tests, we can do telomere testing, we can look at glycanages. I mean, there's a series of very complex, expensive tests that we can do, but not necessarily to get someone on a basic program. The caveat to that is that a lot of longevity programs optimize cells. And I have no way of saying, oh, I'm going to optimize this set of cells, but not that set of cells. So if someone has active cancer, we need to be super, super, super careful because a lot of these things will make cancer worse. So I do make sure that people are cancer-free. That's probably the only true thing we need to make sure of.
Okay, understood. So you read a lot of these, like you're saying, the cell side biohacking hype trends that are kind of going on out there. So for the Kaufmann protocol, how is that different from what other people might see, on Instagram and ads out there that are more pushing the biohacking hype?
So I've decided I love Dave Asprey. He's a nut, but I love him. He, of course, is the king of biohacking, and biohacking is sort of about taking your body and just making changes, right? But people have taken it to the nth degree, right? There's all this goofy stuff you can do. I like to think of what I do as longevity medicine, right? I like to think of it from a physiologic point of view. How can we manipulate your cells, your tissues, your organs to just decrease morbidity and then ultimately decrease mortality? Right? So it's not just supplements, it's medications. I personally am on 12 medications for diseases I do not have, right? And it's not just things that you take. We build people longevity pyramids, right? And the idea is this is based on the sort of like ridiculous fifth grade food pyramid that we all learned. So stuff at the bottom, you do a lot. And then as you go up thing, it's less and less and less, right? So in my world, the bottom of the pyramid is things you do every day. So it's diet, exercise, right? No amount of supplements is going to make you go from 300 pounds down to a skinny mini. Like, that's just not going to happen. So diet, exercise are extraordinarily important. Supplements, medications, and then light therapies, I think, are extraordinarily useful. And then there's a bunch of other ones, right? There's the PEMF, and all that sort of thing. Very useful. Are they absolute basics? I would say no, they're sort of add-ons. Things you do every week, I tell people that you need a full body massage. Increases blood flow, stimulates muscle. A gazillion good things comes out of that. And then monthly, what do? We do exosome infusions. I do glutathione infusions. I do not believe in daily glutathione because you've got negative feedback loops to your NRF2 pathway. But if you do it monthly, it has a lot of fantastic benefits. We also do senolytic therapies once a month, right? And then if you go higher, ultimately at some point, you're going to need plasma exchange. And then higher than that, maybe gene therapy. And I know a lot of people are into stem cell therapy. I'm actually opposed to stem cell therapy. I think that it's more risky and more expensive than exosome therapy, which is safer, cheaper, and more readily available. But anyway, point being is what I do is I develop full therapies and plans for people based on the ideas of cell physiology and longevity medicine. That's it in a nutshell.
That's good because a lot of people will say stay away from the pharmaceuticals, and you're saying like, hey, I'm on some for stuff I don't even have. It's just you're a believer in both sides of supplements and pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, so pharmaceuticals. So the way I like to explain this to people, and everyone can have their opinion, I don't really care, but molecules are molecules. And we can draw it, right? Carbons, nitrogens, oxygens, single bonds, double bonds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're just molecules. They can be made by a plant. They can be made by an animal. They could be made by some dude in a factory, right? It doesn't matter, right? And I would argue that if there's a molecule that has been cleared by the FDA, it's been through $1 billion worth of testing, meaning we know exactly what it does. We know exactly how it's metabolized. We know exactly what the side effect profile would be, right? So it is a more readily knowledgeable thing to do than take a plant that it isn't one molecule. It's probably 30, 50, 100 molecules. And we are hoping to get the desired result based on history, but we don't actually know, right? So I would argue that both of them are good. There are a lot of pharmaceuticals that do things that like natural things cannot do. and vice versa. So I take a combination of both.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, how about like the community around what you're doing in the protocol? Are you seeing a lot of this stuff that you've sort of come up with applied in other mainstream medicines, or do you feel like what you're doing might be a little more ahead of its time to where the rest of that world would catch up to?
This is way ahead of our time. Good question, though. I sort of see medicine today in three tiers or three sort of like processes. Tier one is what most of us live under, right? This is Western, standard Western medicine, where we wait until you get a disease and then we diagnose you and we treat it, right? That's standardly what we do. Then there's tier two, which is more functional medicine. And they say, you should eat better. This is what you should eat. We should test you for mold. We should make sure you don't have any toxicities. You should get more advanced cancer screening. Great, right? And then there's tier three, and that's longevity medicine. This is the idea that we know your sirtuins are going to fail. We know that you're going to be deficient in X, Y, and Z. We know that you're going to become glycated. Like, this is not rocket science. We have millions of millions and millions of people that have already done this. Everyone's died. We know what they've died of for the most part. Like, if you are prophylactic in things that we know are coming down the pike, then we can actively decrease relative risk and then hopefully decrease morbidity.
Yeah, that's definitely way ahead of its time. Okay, I understand what you're saying. When you're looking at the future, then, how do you think the understanding of aging will shift maybe in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think more people are going to pick up on longevity medicine, or do you think we're still stuck in this like tier one and it's going to be that way?
I think it's going to be a slow drift. I mean, just even in the last 10 years where we went from like, no one knew the word longevity, right? I mean, it just didn't, I mean, it was like a wishful thinking. I mean, there's always been something called RadFest. That's been going on for 5 or 6 years. But the club that backs it, like People Unlimited, they've been at this since the 1970s, right? So the goal was there, but they had no tools, right? So everyone has this idea, I want to do better, live better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just we had no tools, but now we actually have tools. So now it's actually becoming real. And the idea is to take this idea. The general population, I think, believes that all of this is just quackery. And sort of one of my goals and why I'm on podcasts such as yours is to sort of get the message out that like I'm not doing voodoo or sleeping on crystals or conferring with aliens or anything nuts, right? I am using cell biology and medical principles to decrease morbidity. Like, but that's an odd idea. But over the course of time, as you've asked, I think slowly, 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 that will increase in like the minds of people. And honestly, it may be such that there's a dichotomy at some point between, we always say that life is a bell-shaped curve, right? It may become two bell-shaped curves. Maybe the people on one end that don't give a shit, right? And then the other side is where people do give a shit, right? I mean, when you go to the mall, you either see the people like jog walking by you that are just like unbelievably lean, full of muscle, wearing their like, fast walking shoes, and they've got their little bottle of water and they look like they're going to the gym. And then you got the 400 pounders in their scooters on their way to get a bag of Cheetos. And I don't want to be offensive to the 400 pounders, but honestly, like there you do see a bimodal shift.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's like you see, well, like how about when you look at tools that you're using now, looking down the pipeline of where do you think that technology is going 5, 10 years? What are we going to be able to tell then that we can't even grasp now?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think it's going to be things that we can't even dream up. However, here's a really good example. So I'm big in the world of exosomes. I love exosomes. And what's do you want, so I don't know what to the degree of what your listeners sort of are aware of, but so in a nutshell, all cells exude exosomes. It's like a secretome, and it's a ball, and it holds messages or directions coming from the mother cell going to another cell to which it is communicating. My analogy is always like an exosome is like an envelope. And if your grandmother sent this envelope, there's probably a $5 bill and it's going to her the grandkid. And if your lover sent you this envelope, it better not have a $5 bill in it, right? Because that's offensive. Anyway, So right now, we are getting exosomes from various cell types. Some people get them from adult platelet-derived cells. We get them from mesenchymal perifetal tissue, amniotic fluid, cord, placenta, etc., right? We take these stem cells, we put them in a medium, and they exude these exosomes. And we know that within each one, there's about 250 microRNAs, growth factors, cytokines, etc. And we take those, and they're not FDA regulated for anything except topical, but us in the longevity world know that they're beneficial. So we use them and we see reparative, regenerative activities. Right? So that's sort of like where we are now. In the future, which is going to be really cool, is we're going to be able to dissect each and every one of those exosomes and determine of those 250 things, what's really good, maybe what's not so good, and maybe we can design those in the absence of having to harvest tissues, right? And what's really cool, so right now we've been using the general population. I've been using first placental and now cord, and we just got introduced to a company that's using trophoblastic cells. And what's cool about that is it's very, very early in the fetal process whereby sperm meets egg and it turns into a ball of cells. There's no fetal tissue there yet per se, but it got aborted because it was an ectopic pregnancy. So that cell line is more pluripotent than, say, something further along down the line. So we are looking at those exosomes to see what increased healing capacity they may have, right? And it's going to be trial and error. But I would guess in a few years, we'll know exactly what's in those exosomes, what's beneficial, what's not, and it'll be very much more specific in terms of treatment.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. Do you ever feel like maybe one day we'll go to, treat aging as a medical condition? So like you're
Oh,
going to the
probably.
clinic for aging.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, how much do you think, if you're a believer in AI and just data-driven personalization, plays a role in even the next evolution of your protocol? Is that something you see working side by side?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, AI has the capacity to just to compute way more numbers and statistics than us humans, right? So once we have the ability, like, what are we measuring? What are we giving to someone, right? I mean, that's going to be able to like look at millions of people and then come up with algorithms that are better than what our little brains can. So there's no doubt that's going to be beneficial. I don't have the capacity to do it at the moment, but I'm sure at some point we will, or I will. And yeah, we will more easily refine, or more specifically refine what we do. We are at the beginning of longevity, right? Like the very beginning. This is like asking Edison after making four light bulbs, what's going to happen like to a city. There's no way he could have said, well, every light bulb in humanity, we're going to change the course of human history. You don't know. We literally are at the we have four light bulb stage.
And certain light bulbs will mess up your circadian rhythm in the future.
Yes.
So like if someone's listening and they're saying, I obviously you're expelling so much like top level knowledge here, but someone just basic level, like I want to take control of my aging, right? What's sort of like the one mindset shift you might want them to take away from what you do and just longevity medicine?
So I think the big takeaway is that the first thing that you have to swallow is that it's alterable. Your pathway is alterable. People look at their parents or their siblings and they say, they had X number of health problems. Everyone always has. I'm going to get it too. Therefore, I'm going to die of such and such. And that may not be true. People can take control beyond standard medicine and be proactive in their future. So that's number one. Number two, it doesn't start out very expensive, right? Exercising, unless you go to some foo-foo gym, is not all that expensive. Honestly, running, jumping up and down, general stretching, it is free and it's really, really, really necessary, right? Diet. It is really easy not to eat something. Actually, that's not true. I can't do it. It is really cheap not to eat something. Women have more problems with intermittent fasting. Men seem to be more capable of it. So I would argue that X number of hours of not eating, it activates AMP kinase, very good for longevity, super easy at least to try and start, right? Once people are along that, then you start, okay, let us start some sort of supplement program. Start with the basics, start with the Panacea. My only ask is that people don't take something because their cousin's uncle's mother told them that it was good for them. Whatever people elect to take, Do your research, make sure it comes from a reputable company, and then don't expect changes in a week. It takes months for these things to work. And as I tell people, you age every day. You need to not age every day. There's no magic pill that's going to set you back 10 years and go, "Oh, I'm done." Doesn't happen. You have to actively reset the clock in your mindset every day.
How does someone actually work with you? Like, what is the process?
So super easy. My website has my email address, and I read all of my emails, me, myself, and I. And if someone is interested in a consult, I send them to my assistant, Charlotte, who's also my niece, conveniently. He sort of vets, tells you whatever sort of, whatever you want to do. I have in-person clinics in Miami, Florida, and in Vegas. And then I do online telemedicine significantly. I do that a lot. And what people do is they send me their medical information. I have the whole form that people fill out. What do you want? What are your medical problems? What are your labs? Blah, blah, blah. It's like going to the regular doctor. I take all that information in, and then we have a sit down and we discuss it, and then we come up with a plan for them. So I can do it, again, in person, telemedicine, and we set something for an individual.
And then on your website, are there opportunities to buy anything that you recommend there?
But so for the moment, so the answer is yes, but no. I have recommendations up there. They are down for the moment because we are sort of rebuilding everything. Give me a few weeks, depending on when this airs, and they will be back up. But yes, because I take a lot of time to vet companies, read their certifications, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we were all hearing about, pills you buy online. You think you're getting this supplement and this manufacturer, and they're being altered and sold to you in different forms. So obviously you have to do your vetting.
Yeah, no, oh, without a doubt. And I will tell you that cheap is not always good and expensive is not always good. Usually when you go to the About Us page on any website of a company, usually it lists all of their certifications. And depending on what country it's made in, there's like 30 different certifications that I counted. But if they have none, you're in trouble. I'll put it that way.
That's so true. What is the website for people to visit?
So it is kaufmannprotocol.com.
I've been on it. Obviously, everything I've read about you, it's like taking a high level science class. Just going to your
Which is
website.
really funny because we tried to water it down. People are like, we don't get, so like I hope it's understandable, you know?
So I appreciate you taking the time today. I've been really, really excited to talk with you. Just what you're doing is amazing. I love the three tiers, and I think that's where everything is going. So thank you for doing what you do, because I think they're really, when people look back on history, this is, like you said, the Edison time, and people are going to remember what you specifically are doing.
Well, I will tell you my secret goal is to be like a footnote in Wikipedia. 50 years, I want to be like, and the field was started by. I want to be right there.
It'd be bigger than a footnote, but yes, I think you at least will get that.
I hope so. I hope so. But you know what? You never know. And clearly, we never do things, but it would be cool to be a footnote in history as being one of the beginners of longevity medicine. That would be cool.
I'm a believer, so you got my vote.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. It's great to talk with you, and I will send everyone to your website. Obviously, you said it'll be in a couple weeks, depending on when this airs, but they can get in touch with you there. Vegas, Miami, telehealth, and you read all your emails. So that's amazing. And
oh yeah. The other thing, let me throw in there, is I also am part of something called Club Exosome, because people always ask about that. And so Club Exosome was designed by myself and a good friend of mine who, in fact, was an Olympic athlete, the guy I referred to. Because I started using exosomes, he decided to start using exosomes, and they were so amazing. He's like, can we share this with my friends and family? So at the time, I didn't have a Nevada license, so we've created, quote unquote, a club, and it has just continued. And the idea is that anyone can get exosomes with us. I'm not their physician, but they can fly to Vegas quarterly, or you'll see it at different longevity conferences. And so we give exosome treatments because most physicians have no blooming idea what they are.
Right. Yeah, you would hear like what was like stem cells. Remember, like athletes would have to fly to Germany to get treatments, right? Like not even that long ago, I feel.
No, still.
Oh, there you go.
And I'm not, stem cells I think are a little risky. You can have autologous, meaning your own, but they're only as old, I mean, they're as old as you are. And then you can get somebody else's, but then I'm worried about like their DNA contamination and surface markers that then theoretically can present with autoimmune disorders, et cetera, or some sort of immune problem. As well, most of non-autologous stem cells just get destroyed within 4 to 5 days anyway. So 80%, 90% of the efficacy of a stem cell is through exosomes. So my thought is use the exosomes. It's easier, it's cheaper, it's safer. Why not? And we wanted to make them available. Thus, I do it in my clinic, and we do it at Club Exosome.
Oh, perfect. I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well then. But thank you so much for your time today. And, it's been great getting to know you and talk with you, Dr. Kaufmann. So have a great rest of your day, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you.